Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Hi. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your practice, your commitment to change the world. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Let's just get into it today. It's another gorgeous day on planet Earth. Yes, there's storms. Yes, there's crazy stupidity going on all over the world. But you know what doesn't get much press is how much of us are doing amazing things. Amazing things you're doing. Amazing things people are doing in the scientific community. Look at what, I don't know. I started listing all these things that are happening, and I'm going to invite criticism, which is a sad thing to say, but this is the age of degeneration, people. There's always somebody who wants to take others down a peg. Let's be people who raise people up a peg. Let's be those people. Okay? I believe you are. I believe that's why you're here. And this is one of the many reasons that I say thank you. I'm greatly appreciative for your mind. Now, we were talking about, we're in that late part of the introduction. Yes, we're finally getting through to the end of the introduction so we can dive into Lankavatara. And Mr. Suzuki is giving us some of the main highlight reel sutras, books, for us to study and investigate. And I think that's a good thing. So we ended with the 8th, and we were moving into the 9th suggestion. All these and other sutras of Mahayana Buddhism may seem to exhaust the many-sided aspects of this school, but another is needed to tell us that mere understanding is not enough in the Buddhist life, that without self-realization, all intellectual amounts to nothing. Right? No matter how well you know anything, let alone Buddhism, well, certainly of Buddhism, but of anything. There are different types of intelligence, and some people learn by doing, some people learn by reading instructions, book learners. There's all different kinds of ways of assimilating knowledge, but ultimately, the greatest self-teaching comes from experience. This is why the Lotus Sutra teaching is so profound, because by simply invoking our innate Buddha mind, we can experience it. Staying in it, right? That's a different story. But experience. So what does Suzuki say here? To tell us this is the office of the Lankavatara Sutra. And Bodhidharma, father of Zen Buddhism, made use of the text quite effectively, for it was through him that a special school of Buddhism under the title of Zen or Chan has come to develop in China and Japan. So there it is, finally. We understand where Mr. Suzuki is coming from. It's not a horrible place. Nietzsche might not agree. He would be very disappointed in Mr. Suzuki. But it certainly is a benchmark, a point of Mahayana history to be aware of, yeah? but he's just given away his impression of the Lankavatara Sutra. I don't share his impression. So let's be clear. As Lotus Sutra Buddhists practicing the scholarship of Buddhism via our most recent scholar, Nichiren, and the scholars before him, his inspirations, Miaolo, Dengyo, Tendai, right, Zi. We're going to go well beyond Suzuki's understanding of Mahayana Buddhism here. He pulled a full stop at Zen. But that's okay. At least we know the author's bias. That's going to help us as we read the Lankavatara to see, oh, interesting that he says this way or interprets this way, because it's going to be in the language he uses. And we'll see where the blockades are to full understanding. We will, I guarantee you. While Zen as we have it now is not the same in many respects as Bodhidharma's first proclaimed it about 15 centuries ago, the spirit itself flows quite unchanged in the East, and this is eloquently embodied in the Lankavatara Sutra. So this calls out that in his translation of the Lankavatara, we're going to be, as I've said many times, he is going to be linguistically circling around this idea of enlightenment as a state of the eighth consciousness, somewhere within the negation of the karma that is our karmic engine of life, and somehow shoehorning Buddhahood in there. But as you and I know, that's not where it belongs, and that's why Zen and Chan cuts you off from actual enlightenment. But he doesn't know that. He doesn't realize that. He's not dealing with the full Mahayana teaching. So kind of feel pity for him, yeah? And the Zen. But we'll see, won't we? It is not, however, necessary here for us to enter into details, for the point has been fully dwelt upon in my recent work, Studies in the Lankavatara Sutra. Boy, he's really pushing that book. Suffice it to touch lightly upon the characteristic features of the sutra which constitute its special message as distinguished from other sutras already referred to. Okay. There is no doubt that the Lanka is closely connected in time as well as in doctrine with the awakening of faith in the Mahayana generally ascribed to Ashvaghosha. Well, I question the word faith there, but we've already identified his bias, yes? While he may, and just because I want you guys to understand why I point this out so much, if you're going to seek enlightenment within the limited sphere of human attachments, tendencies, and conditions, that which makes us samsaric, then you're still clinging to some magical thinking, some quasi-mystical, it's in here somewhere within the attachments, within the descriptions of my very life. And see, that's... to humans, that's very appealing because what is that? That's the entanglements. I laugh inwardly at myself because I immediately make the leap to quantum and quantum entanglements, and I see, wow, it's so tantalizing to go there. But even in quantum entanglements, it's not mystical. It's a property, a tendency and conditions of energy becoming mass, energy transforming into thing, into It's very samsaric, albeit super profound, but it still belongs to samsara. It doesn't transcend samsara. It touches on, the outer skin, if you will, like a sausage. And the skin is not the sausage, and the sausage is not the skin. But scraping at the skin, there's something much larger outside that skin that is not sausage. My analogies make me laugh. So, while he may not have been the author of this most important treatise of Mahayana philosophy, there was surely a great Buddhist mind who, inspired by the same spirit which pervades the Lanka, the Avatamsaka, and the Parinirvana, etc., poured out his thoughts in the Awakening. Some scholars contend that the Awakening is a Chinese work, but this is not well grounded. So he's still struggling with the scholarship around his chosen path of Mahayana, right, as Chan Zen. In a way, the Awakening is an attempt to systematize the Lanka, for all the principal teachings of the latter are found and developed in due order. As far as the theoretical side is concerned, both teach the existence of the Garbha as ultimate reality, and that's that version of Buddhahood that is found in the karmic train. And you can see, as Lotus Sutra Buddhists were like, what? That's not right. Well, yeah, you and I know that. But it's useful to see this bias, and we can learn from it, right? While this lies in ordinary people defiled by the evil passions and does not shine out in its native purity, we cannot deny its existence in them. When the external wrappage of impurities is peeled off, we all become Buddhas and Tathagatas. In fact, the birth of the Tathagata is nowhere else than in this Garbha. The Garbha is, from the psychological point of view, the Alya Vijnana, all-conserving mind, in which good and bad are mingled, and the work of the yogin, that is, one who seeks the truth by means of self-discipline, is to separate the one from the other. All of this validates what I just said, right? Looking for Buddhahood in the Alaya consciousness. It's just not there. Why is the Alaya found contaminated by evil thoughts and desires? What is evil? How does it come out of this world? How is the truth to be realized? These questions are answered by postulating a system of Vijnanas and by the doctrine of discrimination, as has already been expounded above. This is the point where the Lanka comes in contact with the Yogacara school. Again, those are events happening in the early years of this modern time period, the Common Era, right? Around the time of Nagarjuna. The Yogacara is essentially psychological standing in contrast in this respect to the Madhyamaka school, which is epistemological. You might as well say Nagarjuna here. But the Alaya Vijnana and of the Yogacara is not the same as the Lanka and the awakening of resolve, faith. These people. The former conceives the Alaya to be purity itself, with nothing defiled in it, whereas the Lanka and the awakening make it the cause of purity and defilement. Further, the Yogacara upholds the theory of Vijnaptimatra and not that of Siddhamatra, which belongs to the Lanka, the Avatamsaka, and the awakening of resolve. I don't know if I'd include the Avatamsaka, but he's shoehorning a lot of his biases into the greater oeuvre of Shakyamuni's teachings. The difference is this. According to the Vijnaptimatra, the world is nothing but ideas. There is no reality behind them. But the Siddhamatra states that there is nothing but Siddha, mind, in the world, and that the world is objectification of mind. The one is pure idealism, the other idealistic realism. And neither of them completely accurate. I've got a stray hair. This is why I don't like mustaches. They tickle the nose. It's very perturbing. To realize the Citta-matra is the object of the Lanka, and this is not done when discrimination is discarded, that is, when a state of non-discrimination is attained in one's spiritual life, spiritual here being mind, mental life. Discrimination is a logical term and belongs to the intellect. Thus, we see that the end of the religious discipline is to go beyond intellectualism, for to discriminate, to divide, is the function of the intellect. So he's basically putting fancy words to what I said earlier, trying to find Buddha in the phenomenal world, which is not where it is. Logic, and I'll clarify that. I know that just was a little disturbing to hear. Logic does not lead one to self-realization. The hell it doesn't. Hence Nagarjuna's hair-splitting dialects. His idea is to prove the ineffectiveness of logic in the domain of our spiritual life. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. That's completely wrong. Nagarjuna's exercises in argumentation to the point of ridiculousness, which is a form of argumentation, or as he says it here, hair-splitting dialectics, was to demonstrate that, how did he say it here? The ineffectiveness of logic in the domain of our spiritual life. Nagarjuna was using logic very effectively to demonstrate that there can be no other understanding. Through reason, through rational thinking, it is possible to realize all of the mess of attachments that keep us from experiencing the completely clear. He wasn't negating logic, he was using logic. So, again, this is a very Zen point of view, that somehow we need to transcend all of our humanness in order to realize something mystical, something outside ourselves. And all of that I put to you and anyone listening to or reading about this, that mistake is because of the lack of understanding of a ninth consciousness, an actual facet of mind that is Buddhahood. Another logical conclusion, evidenced by experience itself. Unqualified, qualified only by the other 8 consciousnesses of our samsaric existence. If it ain't there, then that points to something outside our lives. And we've already dismissed that thoroughly with anatman, impermanence, no self-nature. To say that in our self-nature there is something outside of it that we can perceive is to say that Buddhahood is not achievable in this life. And that is not the teaching of Buddhism. Buddhahood is part and parcel inherent in our samsaric life. In fact, this samsaric life is the only place where Buddhahood may be experienced. It doesn't lie outside of this life. Spiritual doesn't convert from mind to cosmos or non-cosmos, unthingness. Unthingness is part of thingness. Otherwise, why bother? Why bother? If I can never achieve an experience of Buddhahood, why in the hell am I practicing every day, studying all of this word salad? Come on, it's just too hard. Really. Let's go on. Hence, Nagarjuna's hair-splitting dialectics is this is where the Lanka joins hands with the Madhyamaka. That's an interesting contradiction. The doctrine of the void is indeed the foundation of Mahayana philosophy. That's totally Zen talking there. No, it is not. The void is not the point of Mahayana. But this is not to be understood in the manner of analytical reasoning. Of course not. The Lanka is quite explicit and not to be mistaken in this respect. You think it's so. So far, the Lanka may seem to have been only a philosophical treatise with nothing religious in it. Yeah, but you're going to make sure it has religion in it, because that's Suzuki, right? But the fact is that the sutra is deeply tinged with religious sentiments. This is making me upset. Suzuki, you're imposing your mysticism on something that is not mystical. For instance, the Bodhisattva would not enter into nirvana because of his vows to save all sentient beings, and his vows are not limited in time and space, but for this reason are called inexhaustible. So he thinks that makes it religious, because he's taking it as a physical reality, a mystical, magical thing. And I've told, how many times have we talked about this? When we talk about a bodhisattva never disparaging, for instance, that's a personage. It's not a real person. Suzuki is saying, well, if he can never exhaust his vow to save all beings, well, then he must live forever. Oh, he's like a deity. No, Mr. Suzuki, what that means is the state of mind of bodhisattva that we all have will always be within the human experience. It's a personage, an exemplar facet of mind, the way the mind works. Come on. This adamantine ridiculousness of looking at everything as magical and mystical is a leftover of ignorant, unenlightened, primitive man, primitive minds. There's nothing of that in Buddhism, although there's a lot of rhetoric like that in Buddhism because of who Shakyamuni was teaching. People that were deeply steeped in mysticism and magical thinking. Just study India, right? The Vedic teachings, the Brahmins, the Hindus, oh my goodness. They don't even know how many gods they have and deities because everything is magical to them. So if you're going to try to bring them to logic and rational thinking, you're going to have to use a lot of muddy, steeped in magical stories and cultural language to slowly walk them out of that forest of incredible fantasy into the real. It takes a lot of time. So a lot of Buddhism has that language in it, but not to reinforce that rhetoric, rather to lead you out of it. Ah, well. Not only are his vows inexhaustible, but the skillful means he uses, skillful means are words, stories, intellectualizations to reach people where they are and walk them toward enlightenment. That's skillful means. Let me talk to you where you are and start to influence you to a better place. But that's not mystical. That's very beautiful. That's bodhisattva. That's human interaction. It ain't coming from some cloud in some non-universe place. Come on. Let's grow up, Mr. Suzuki. He uses for the emancipation of all beings, knowing no limits. He knows how to make the best use of his inexhaustible resources. They're not his inexhaustible resources. They are the inexhaustible Bodhi mind throughout time-space. He's individuating that mind into a single person. That's the magical thinking. Okay, here we may say Bodhisattva Samadhavara of the Adavatamsaka or the Gandhava Yuha is reflected. Reflected, yes, but not instantiated. In the Lanka, all the most fundamental conceptions of the Mahayana are thrown in without any attempt on the part of the compiler. Are we to believe that Suzuki's the compiler? No. Or compilers to give them a system. This is left to the thoughtful reader himself, who will pick them up from the medley and string them into a garland of pearls out of his own. All right, I'm done with his religious bullshit here. So in the next chapter, he wanders around the date of the Lanka. And this can't be left to just Suzuki because there's so much scholarship on the periods of Buddhism. And certainly when the translations happened and then the written books happened. So he says, for one thing, it had to be before 443 AD when the first Chinese translated is reported to have been attempted. But to know that it was before 2020 doesn't really tell us anything, does it? All right, I'm fed up. Yeah, there wasn't much more anyway. Now it's all his theorizing and self-glorifying. So let's get to chapter 1, although we will be reading. All right. Are you ready? Let's get into the Lankavatara. Enough introduction. Now, he has a paragraph here. It says, Om, salutation to the triple treasure, salutation to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Here is carefully written down the Lankavatara Sutra, in which the Lord of the Dharma discourses on the egolessness of all things. Now, he states that this Gothic numeral in parentheses refers to the pages of the Sanskrit edition. How it's translated and by whom, he doesn't tell us. Now we get to the sutra itself, albeit his translation. And we know that we're now starting the sutra because what do you think the first words are of the first chapter? Thus have I heard. Right? The Blessed One. I chose a word to replace that because that, what does blessing or blessed mean? We hear it all the time and we don't even think about it. But it explicitly means something given to you. Well, if Shakyamuni heard that, he'd crap himself. I'm sorry, but he would. What? No, nobody gave me. I spent 12 long years almost killing myself in ascetic practices and practices of every sort. And then, my own 6 of those 12 years deeply considering this question of the truth, the absolute truth. And at no time did somebody walk up to me and tap me on the shoulder and go, here's the answer. No, I attained those through my own insights, my own cerebration. Yes, in my own mind. Shakyamuni himself did not have some magical appearance of a cloud imbue him with Buddhahood. He had dreams, certainly, but that was his mind functioning and working it out. And he achieved insights. And then he finally realized Buddhahood, a function of his own mind. And this is what he taught for over 50 years after that, trying to bring people to that. Not an easy task. Look at how long it took him personally. So no, he's not the blessed one. He's the accomplished one. He's the emancipated one. I like that. The emancipated one, who had been preaching in the palace of the king of the sea serpents. Now, are we imagining that the king actually had sea serpents serving him tea? No, of course not. We need to get this magical thinking out of the way, don't we? So he was preaching, came out at the expiration of 7 days, and was greeted by an innumerable host of Nagakanyas, including Sakra and Brahma, and looking at Lanka on Mount Malaya, smiled and said, quote, "By the Tathagatas of the past, who were arhats and fully enlightened ones, this truth was made the subject of their discourse at that castle of Lanka on the mountain peak of the Malaya. The truth realized by noble wisdom in one's inmost self, which is beyond the reasoning knowledge of the philosophers, as well as the state of consciousness of the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas." I too would now, for the sake of Ravana, overlord of the Yakshas, discourse on this truth. End quote. All right, so what did Shakyamuni say? Now, okay, so he's talking at Lanka on a mountain peak, and the truth realizable by noble wisdom in one's inmost self is our own experience, which is beyond the reasoning knowledge of the philosophers, which are psychological, as well as the state of consciousness of the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. We've identified this before outside the Lanka. The reason the segmentation of Buddhism exists for the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, the arhats, is because they're stuck in their ego, their alaya consciousness, as the construct of everything. They're blocked off. That the ninth consciousness, the Buddha consciousness, noble wisdom in one's inmost self, the ninth consciousness, is how we realize and experience our Buddha-ness. Do you see how our knowledge of the Lotus Sutra and the full breadth of Mahayana leads us clearly to this conclusion? Whereas this teaching prior, and certainly written and translated by a Zen, is so limited. It's in the words themselves. I'm not locked onto the words. I'm just saying, if you see through the words the meaning, it becomes obvious, but not if you have an incomplete understanding. It's just like anything else, right? I figured that out with my mind. No. By the spiritual power of the Tathagata, Ravana, lord of the Rakshasas, heard his voice. In other words, he got the attention of a lot of people with a certain mindset. Remember, this is all about the mind. Indeed, the emancipated one, surrounded and accompanied by an innumerable host of Nagakanyas, including Sakra and Brahma, came out of the palace of the king of the sea serpents, and looking at the waves of the ocean and also at the mental agitations going on in those assembled, he thought, the ocean of the Arya Vijnana where the evolving Vijnanas, like the waves, are stirred by the wind of objectivity, but that's an objectivity of the philosophical world or the physical world, not the objectivity of Buddha. While he was standing there, thus absorbed in contemplation, Ravana saw himself and uttered a joyous cry, saying, quote, "I will go and request of the emancipated one to enter into Lanka for this long night. He would probably profit, do good, and gladden the gods as well as human beings." There it is again. What does he attribute this to? Well, I don't see his third note. That's interesting. Why would he leave it out? Anyway, I don't really care. Thereupon Ravana, lord of the Rakshasas, with his attendants, riding in his floral celestial chariot, oh my goodness, came up where the emancipated one was, and having arrived there, he and his attendants came out of the chariot. Walking around the emancipated one for 3 times from left to right, they played on musical instruments, beating it with a stick of blue Indra sapphire, and having the lute on one side, which was laden with the choicest lapis lazuli, and supported by a ribbon of priceless cloth, yellowish white like priyangu. They sang with various notes such as Sabashra, Vrishaba, Gandhara, Daivata, Nishada, Madhyama, and Kaisika. Yeah. Which were melodiously modulated in grama. Okay, so basically, all of these these people with these mental attributes that were curious and wanting to know more. That's all that says. They came and sang, chanted, requested with the measure of the Gatha, and we have these numbered stanzas here. 1. The truth treasure, whose principle is the self-nature of mind, has no selfhood, stands above all reasoning, and is free from impurities. It points to the knowledge attained in one's inmost self. Lord, show me here the way leading to the truth. How do I practice Buddhism? How do I get to this experience, all-knowing experience, untainted experience, unmodulated experience, right? 2, the Sugata is the body in whom are stored immaculate virtues. In him are manifested bodies transforming and transformed. He enjoys the truth realized in his inmost self. May he visit Lanka. Now is the time. Muni, remember? Great sage. Muni, Shakya, Muni, great sage of the Shakya clan. Shakya Muni. A human, a man. 3, and then he's putting all these attributes on this man. The attributes of the manifested bodies, right? Manifest, reward, dharma. This Lanka was inhabited by the Buddhas of the past, and they were accompanied by their sons, who were owners of many forms. Lord, show me how now the highest truth, and the yakshas who are endowed with many forms will listen. So, teach us. Why doesn't it just say that, yeah? Thereupon Ravana, the lord of Lanka, further adapting the Totaka rhythm, sang this in the measure of the Gatha. See, all of the teachings of Buddhism were song. So if anyone asks you, why do you chant? Well, that's how the practice of Buddhism was shared, inculcated, learned, practiced. I mean, it's in all of the sutras are songs. Those are the sermons of Shakyamuni. Sanskrit was a song-like language. Let's be clear. It's a very full of intonations, and it's an expressive language. It's no wonder that the part of the world that communicated in song, quasi-language, is the origin of Buddhism. It's the most closely experienced samsaric thing to Buddha-ness. It has a rhythm, a sensation, right? Like life. After 7 nights, the emancipated one, leaving the ocean which is the abode of the Makara, the palace of the Sea King, now stands on the shore. Okay. Just as the Buddha rises, Ravana, accompanied by the Apsaras and the Yakshas, numerous by Sukha, Sarana, and learned men, so all types of people attended this sermon. 6, miraculously goes over to the place where the Lord is standing. Alighting from the floral vehicle, he greets the Tathagata reverentially, makes him offerings, tells him who he is, and stands by the Lord. Okay, so now we're going to go through this elaborate ceremony of introductions. All of this is to say that this was a damn important sermon, and we all respectfully heard it. So don't get confused by all this beatific language. And that's true of all sutras, yeah? 7, I who have come here am called Ravana, the 10-headed king of the Rakshasas. 10-headed king. Now, you know this is an exploration of the mind. It's using our imagination to imagine somebody who has excellent mental powers because he got 10 brains, right? Mayest thou graciously, oh man, we're all over the map here, time-wise, receive me with Lanka and all its residents. So make sure that your talk is super intellectual so that I can appreciate it. Okay. In this city, the inmost state of consciousness realized indeed by the enlightened ones of the past was disclosed on this peak studded with precious stones. So there's an allusion made here, not illusion, allusion, to Shakyamuni Buddha just being another of a long line of enlightened men. And so let's hear what you now have to say. That's historical context. That's a mental device that says, you can't be more than me. It's full of human avarice, isn't it? Just a very magical thinking. And this is what a lot of people, religious people, don't understand. The supreme arrogance of their magical thinking. They think they're humble, but oh my God, what a distorted view of the life, the universe. That somehow I'm so humbled to believe that this whole universe is something that I control, maintain as a disembodied deity. The world that we experience is certainly our world, your world, my world. But that is the thing that limits us. The attachment to the thingness of the universe is the thing that limits us. Our Buddha mind allows us to see that drama with tremendous compassion, right? Because of the attachments it spawns. It so holds us back from experiencing the real moment-to-moment aspect of all phenomena. This is a difficult shift, and the Lankavatara hasn't quite made that yet, but it's pointing to it. Trying to find it within the attachments. Sorry. This is the great drama of expanding the mind to finally breaking that last tendril. And oh, now I get it. Let's go on, realizing this is Suzuki's translation. In this city, the inmost state of consciousness realized, indeed, by the enlightened ones of the past, was disclosed on the peak studded with precious stones. Now that's an illusion we can find where? The peak studded with precious stones. Doesn't that later become the treasure tower? Which, by the way, is you and I. You and me, sorry. Yeah. Let the emancipated one, too, surrounded by sons of the victorious one, now disclose the truth immaculate on this peak, embellished with precious stones. We together with the residents of Lanka desire to listen. Wow, we can see the form taking shape of the beginnings of the Lotus Sutra, and many sutras, to be honest, of a description of the attendees, the importance and significance of the sermon, the teaching about to be heard, the request, albeit in a form of almost an order. We all desire to listen. So we're all committed to hearing this very important teaching. It's a formulaic thing, right? So you can't pay too much attention to the language specifically because you can get lost in that. 10. The Lankavatara Sutra, which is praised by the Buddhas of the past, discloses the inmost state of consciousness realized by them, which is not founded on any system of doctrine. Next paragraph. I recollect the Buddhas of the past, surrounded by sons of the victorious one, recite this sutra. The emancipated one, too, will speak. So, we've had many great men enlighten us. Now it's your turn. In a way that's supposed to be, somewhat setting the stage for Shakyamuni to know that he's not just some guy teaching that he stands on the shoulders of every person before, and therefore somehow this exalts him. Whatever. In the time to come, there will be Buddhas and Buddha sons pitying the yakshas. The leaders will discourse on this magnificent doctrine on the peak adorned with precious stones. This magnificent city of Lanka is adorned with varieties of precious stones, surrounded by peaks refreshing and beautiful, and canopied by a net of jewels. Emancipated one, here are the yakshas who are free from faults of greed, reflecting on the truth realized in one's inmost self, and making offerings to the Buddhas of the past. They are believers in the teachings of the Mahayana and intent on disciplining one another, the Sangha. There are younger yakshas, girls and boys, desiring to know the Mahayana. Come, emancipated one, who art our teacher, come to Lanka on Mount Malaya. Still, this is the form of beseeching the great sage from the Shakyamuni, to teach the Mahayana, the latest version of inward study to attainment, right? The Rakshasas with Kumambhakarna at their head, who are residing in the city, wish, as they are devoted to the Mahayana, to hear about this inmost realization. They have made offerings assiduous. Now see, It's in the language too. You realize that how many times he said this inmost realization. Again, that's inmost in what? In the alaya consciousness, in this freight train of karma. Where can we identify this realization? 17. They have made offerings assiduously to the Buddhas in the past and are ready today going to do the same thing. Come, for compassion's sake, to the Lanka, together with thy sons, thy disciples, right? Mahamati, accept my mansion, the company of the apsaras, necklaces of various sorts, and the delightful Asoka garden. I give myself up to serve the Buddhas and their sons. There is nothing with me that I do not give up. For their sake, great Muni, have compassion on me. Hearing him speak thus, the Lord of the triple world said, King of Yakshas, this mountain of precious stones was visited by the leaders in the past, by the leaders in the past, and taking pity on you, they discoursed on the truth revealed in their inmost consciousness. The Buddhas of the future time will proclaim the same on this jewel-adorned mountain. This inmost truth is the abode of those yogins who stand at the presence of the truth. King of the Yakshas, you have the compassion of the Sugatas and myself. The emancipated one, accepting the request of the king, remained silent and undisturbed. He now mounted the floral chariot offered by the Ravana. Thus Ravana and others, wise sons of the victorious one, honored by the Espadas, singing and dancing, reaching the city. Arriving in the delightful city, the Buddha was again the recipient of honors. He was honored by the group of yakshas, including Ravana, and by the yaksha women. A net of jewels was offered to the Buddha by the younger yakshas, girls and boys, and necklaces beautifully ornamented with jewels were placed at by Ravana about the neck of the Buddha and those of the sons of the Buddha. The Buddhas, together with the sons of the Buddha, and the wise men accepting the offerings, discoursed on the truth, which is the state of consciousness realized in the inmost self. The state of consciousness realized in the inmost self. I mean, if we're not talking about the 8 or 9 consciousnesses here, what are we talking about? Honoring him as the best speaker, Ravana and the company of the yakshas honored Mahamati and requested of him again and again. So we keep shifting from Shakyamuni to Mahamati here. So perhaps this whole introduction is about presenting these two great minds to hash this thing out, which is in fact what the Lankavatara is, yeah? Thou art the seeker, thou. How does thou come into Sanskrit? And I mean, this is so Western, yeah? This is medieval, right? Thou art the asker of the Buddha concerning the state of consciousness realized in their inmost selves, of which we are. Yakshas as well as the son of the Buddha are desirous of hearing. I, together with the yakshas, the sons of the Buddha, and the wise men request this of thee. Thou art the most eloquent of speakers, and the most strenuous of the yogins. What? With faith I beg of thee, with conviction I beg of thee. Get rid of this religious language. Ask the Buddha about the doctrine, O thou the proficient one. So now we've identified Mahamati. He's basically going to be the stand-in for all of the people's questions. He is the most accomplished, right? Free from the faults of the philosophers and Pratyeka Buddhas and Stravakas is the truth of the inmost consciousness, immaculate and culminating in the stage of Buddhahood. See, they're looking for Buddhahood. Therefore, the emancipated one created jewel-adorned mountains and other objects magnificently embellished with jewels in an immense number. This fascination with jewels, doesn't it smack of complete attachment? Why do you need shiny things to offer enlightenment, to be enlightened, to somehow vault the value of whatever you're doing by showering these precious stones? They're just rocks. On the summit of each mountain, the Buddha himself was visible. The Ravana, the Yaksha also was found standing there. Thus, the entire assembly was seen on each mountain peak, and all the countries were there, and in each there was a leader. Again, this is the hyperbole of the attention being lavished on this teaching. Here also was the king of the Rakshasas, and the resident of Lanka, and the Lanka created by the Buddha, rivaling something. He got in quotes the real one. I'm not sure what that's about. Other things were there too. The Ashoka, with its shining woods, and on each mountain peak, Mahamati was making a request of the Buddha, who discoursed for the sake of the Yakshas on the truth leading to the inmost realization. On the mountain peak, he delivered a complete sutra with an exquisite voice, varied in hundreds of thousands of ways. After this, the teacher and the sons of the Buddha vanished away in the air, leaving Ravana, the Yaksha, himself standing above in his mansion. Thought he, "How is this? What means this? And by whom was it heard? What was it that was seen? And by whom was it seen? Where is this city? And where is the Buddha?" Quote, "Where are those countries, those jewel-shining Buddhas, those Sugatas? Is it a dream, then, or a vision? Or is it a castle conjured up by the Gandharas? Or is it dust in the eye? Or a fata morgana? Or the dream child of a barren woman? Or the smoke of a fire wheel, that which I saw here?" The Ravana reflected, "This is the nature as it is, dharmata, of all things, which belongs to the realm of the mind. And it is not comprehended by the ignorant, as they are confused by every form of imagination. There is neither the seer nor the seen, neither the speaker nor the spoken. The form and usage of the Buddha and his Dharma, they are nothing but discrimination." Again, from the ground of the 8 consciousnesses, that is how you would understand it. Those who see things such as they are seen before do not see the Buddha when discrimination is not aroused. One does not see the Buddha. The Buddha, being fully enlightened, is seen where the world itself is not evolved, because it's a moment-to-moment perception. It doesn't have built upon the past. It doesn't have moving toward the future. It simply is. This awareness, this participation in the flow of energies that is life, is completely unencumbered by past or future. Those things don't exist. Only in this moment, as it moves through time-space, do things exist. This is a mental perception that I've reviewed many, many times, but the Lanka is going to, I'm sorry, maybe muddy this a little bit for you. And I'm going to keep pointing it out, because it's only muddied by virtue of a lack of complete understanding in the 9 consciousnesses, yeah? So don't let yourself get influenced there. Just realize this isn't completely, fully developed Dharma. The Lotus Sutra is. That's why we practice it. But this is getting close. It's getting us there, right? This is why this is a provisional teaching. So, Yeah. Let me see how much more I want to read. That's the end of the song part. The Lord of the Lanka was then immediately awakened from his reflection, feeling a revulsion, the paravriti, in his mind, and realizing that the world was nothing but his own mind. He was settled in the realm of non-discrimination, was urged by the stock of his past good deeds, acquired the cleverness of understanding all the text, obtained the faculty of seeing things as they are, was no more dependent upon others, observed things excellently with his own wisdom, buddhai, wisdom, not bodhi, buddhai, gained the insight that was not of discursive reasoning, words, was no more dependent upon others, became a great yogin of the discipline, was able to manifest himself in all excellent forms, got thoroughly acquainted with all skillful means, had the knowledge and characteristic aspects of every stage by which he would surmount it skillfully, was delighted to look into the self-nature of Sita, Manas, Manovijnana, got a view whereby he could cut himself loose from the triple continuation, past, present, future, had the knowledge of disposition of every argument of the philosophers on causation, thoroughly understood the Tathagata Garbha, the stage of Buddhahood, the inmost self, found himself abiding in the Buddha knowledge when suddenly a voice was heard from the sky, where else, saying, "It is to be known by oneself." I'm going to stop there because I want to end with what he just experienced, although in the Lanka is I think it's expressed well, but I think its interpretation is lacking. And you know who I blame for that. So, what he just talked about is exactly something I've talked to you guys about many, many times. This is what happens when you have a proper altar, a proper mandala, and you single-mindedly sit before your mandala and you focus your mind, your consciousnesses on Buddha. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. And you will experience exactly what that paragraph talked about. That's it. That's your innermost wisdom, experience, letting go of. There's a great letting go of attachments in that paragraph. You heard it. I'll read it again if you want. That is the moment of awakening. And that innermost consciousness is the ninth. It's not in the alaya. It transcends the alaya. The very description in words transcends the alaya. Because it's not dependent on the freight train. The karma that brought this to be in this moment doesn't make this moment more or less real. This moment is it. And we carry that awakened moment through time-space, and we apply that wisdom, the Buddhai wisdom, to everything else, this mire that is the samsaric existence. And I don't mean mire as though it's ugly, but that is the source of ugliness. That is the attachments, right? The possessions, the drama. He just described what chanting actually manifests. So hooray, it's in the Lankavatara. And guess what? It's been in every other sutra. It's just being taught to certain minds, which we've already identified in the Lankavatara in this introduction as, we're the best. We're the most smartest. And we're here to hear from you. So these are the intellectuals. So they need to be spoken to in an intellectual way. But that doesn't mean that the Dharma is intellectual. It just means that to those minds, which you and I experience every day, a certain tone, a certain way of describing must be adopted to go to where they are, those minds, and then gently urge them into this Buddha mind. You see? Now I'll go back and remind you, how often have you heard the allusion or the analogy to schooling? You don't start with the most evolved part of anything in order to teach somebody who knows nothing about the subject. You start with basics, and you build on basics, and then you build on those assumptions, and then you build on those hypotheticals, and then you build on those reasoned experiments, and then you build on those who are investigating. Their intellect, their knowledge, their experience grows with every level of teaching. And so now in the Lankavatara, we're teaching people who are usually locked in their brains. And they've already told us so, because they're talking about a teaching that transcends or goes beyond the Shravakas, people of learning, the Pratyeka Buddhas, people who are inculcating the learnings, right? Realizing the depth of the teachings. And the Bodhisattvas, who are trying their damnedest to experience this innermost severing, right? He calls it revulsion, but it's just a dislodging from the attached, possessive world experience. And those are the people we're talking to now in the Lankavatara. Now, all of us have those capacities. So it's just a different facet of our own minds, right? All right. Thank you for listening. This was, again, a bit of a long one today. But let me know what your experience is with this. Maybe you've read this sutra before. Maybe my approach to it is unlocking it a bit. I hope that it is. Let me know, like, dislike, comment. All of it helps the algorithm make this channel come up more easily in the Google search or the YouTube searches. Yeah, and Google searches, I think. Same thing, basically. Anyway, that's very supporting for our practice and our mission of propagation. So please do that. Subscribe. And to the patrons who, whether it's one-time donations or regular monthly donations, any amount, all of it is fabulous and very critical to all of us. So we all thank you. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Please take care of yourself. Be kind to yourself and others, but it starts with yourself, doesn't it? And I can't wait to really dive into this Lankavatara. It's exciting to me. And I will see you soon with another. Bye for now.